we are now in Hos, and this is where my father was in May of 1945 at the end of the war. He was a captain at the time, and he got a Jeep and a sergeant, and he went and he started his journey.
In the days of the German surrender of May 1945, Manfred Gans, a young British officer, travels across Germany, his former home. It is an adventurous trip with the goal of finding his parents still alive in a concentration camp. On the night of his return, he writes down the impressions of his journey. The style is tight, precise, unsentimental. The content is almost unbelievable.
At last we are ready to push off. The driver has only been told about the trip quarter of an hour ago. He is all for it. The weather is perfect. We travel in shirt sleeves. Leave Hus, South Beverland, round about 12 o'clock.
More than 70 years later, the descendants of Manfred Gans retrace his steps.
This is a trip that it ties a lot of the heritage together, and for us all to do it together makes it very meaningful, and it also enlightens each one of us to the stories, because we each have different stories that we've been told by our fathers and by our grandparents, and now we can really sit after all these years and really trade the stories we have.
We have this famous trip of Manfred, my uncle, that he wrote about, and all his book that he wrote about himself. And a long time ago already, I thought to myself it would be very nice to see if we can do this trip once again. And I think that, first of all, in the honor of Manfred, we're doing this trip, and in the honor of our grandparents and the whole family.
The summer of 2016. 18 members of the Gans family from Israel and the USA come to Europe. Together they set off on a journey from the Netherlands across Germany to Theresienstadt in Czech Republic. They follow the route taken by Manfred Gans in May 1945.
Well, I love Manfred, so for me this is whatever it takes. I knew I'll come here and do this, follow him.
You know, connecting with my whole family and seeing everyone come together for my grandfather, I think it's one of the coolest things that could happen, and have every 18 people following his footsteps. He's probably super happy right now.
Manfred is born in 1922. The Gans family is well respected in their hometown Borken in the western Münsterland. Karl Gans, the grandfather, is a successful textile trader. He and his wife Amalia have 10 children. The family is close, as Manfred's cousin Leo Gans remembers.
The reason the Gans family is really a clan is that my grandmother had a birthday on December 31st. So annually, all the 19 cousins that I had assembled for that birthday party. So because of this connection, which was a given, you weren't doing anything else during that time or planning anything else, the family stayed extremely close.
Moritz Gans is the fourth of 10 siblings. During the First World War, he fights for the German Empire on the battle line in Italy. He loses a leg and a lung. After 1918, he gained further prestige as a war veteran in his hometown. He becomes vice chairman of the Jewish community and is politically active.
Das mündet darin, dass im Jahr 1929 bei den Kommunalwahlen mit Moritz Ganz das erste Mal auch ein Vertreter der jüdischen Minderheit in den Stadtrat gewählt wird. Er ist einer von 2 Kandidaten, die für die SPD in die Stadtverordnetenversammlung einziehen. Das ist schon außergewöhnlich, das kann man schon sagen. Da wird auch einfach die überzeugende und glaube auch wirklich geradlinige Persönlichkeit von Moritz Ganz eine wichtige Rolle gespielt haben.
Officially, the Jewish community in Borken, with its synagogue in the city centre, enjoys respect in the 1920s. But many of the population behave ambivalent towards their Jewish fellow citizens.
Auf der einen Seite gab es also eine relativ fortgeschrittene Akkulturation und auch soziale Integration der jüdischen Minorität. Jedenfalls gab es viele Bereiche, Felder und auch öffentliche Gesten, die das hervorhoben. Und das waren Gesten, die eben von den meinungsführenden Instanzen in der Stadt kamen und damit natürlich auch eine Wirkung hatten auf die breite katholische Bevölkerung. Man kann aber nicht daraus schließen, dass in der Breite der katholischen Bevölkerung es keinerlei antisemitische oder antijüdische Vorbehalte gegeben hätte.
Moritz and his wife Else have 3 sons, Karl, Manfred and Theo. Almost perfect domestic bliss. But with Hitler's takeover in January 1933, the situation in the small town of Borken changes immediately.
Wenn man berücksichtigt, dass Borken also wirklich eine Zentrumshochburg war und eine Hochburg des katholischen Milieus mit dem ganzen katholischen Vereins- und Verbandswesen, das sich so wie konzentrische Kreise um die Pfarrkirche sozusagen gruppiert hat, dann ist es schon deprimierend zu sehen, wie schnell eigentlich diese doch eher gegenüber dem Nationalsozialismus kritischen und resistenten Kräfte überspielt worden sind.
Although the Centre Party of Borken and the Catholic associations were still full of mistrust about the National Socialists at the beginning of the year, they begin to support Hitler's national state soon after he seized power. On May 1st, 1933, the Catholic associations take part in the National Labour Day rally. The Catholic Youth League Neu-Deutschland marches in harmony with the Hitler Youth of Borken. From that moment, Karl, Manfred and Theo Ganz start to sense exclusion in their high school. The family census change. In 1936, Moritz and Else send their eldest son Karl to Palestine. 2 years later, the 2 younger brothers Manfred and Theo also leave Borken. Because the threatened exclusion has reached intolerable levels, their parents arranged their emigration to England.
I think my grandfather knew that it wasn't just for the summer. And he told my father ultimately to stay there. When he first got to England, he was very happy because nobody looked at him differently. Nobody cared who he was. He could walk the streets and do what he wanted, but he still was an outsider and he still was not accepted.
The kids are gone. The parents stay in Borken for the time being. Shortly before the outbreak of war, Moritz and Else Ganz flee to the Netherlands. A short time later, Germany invades and occupies the neighboring country, and they have to disappear in 1940. But they are betrayed and deported to the SS camp Westerbork. As the steps are retraced, the family pauses. They learn where and how their grandparents had to live.
On this occasion, barrack number 97 has been standing, and it was a place to live in the time that Else Ganz was imprisoned here. Women's barrack probably.
Westerbork is a transit camp for detained Jews. Subsequently, Moritz and Else Gens are deported eastwards, first to Bergen-Belsen, later to Theresienstadt.
They didn't get into details about we were in this camp and then this camp. We knew they had been in Theresienstadt. My father's mother would talk about the recipes they would talk about at the camps, and they told us these stories, but certainly not the horror and the fears that they must have felt. That understanding was not pushed on us as children, that we are the survivors of the Holocaust.
Manfred, for me, is a relationship with the Holocaust. Not that my grandparents were in a concentration camp, but the story of Manfred, and that I read everything and he talked to me about it, he is my connection to the Holocaust.
While the parents are deported to the concentration camp, their son Manfred becomes a soldier in the British Army and is given a new identity in England. As Frederick "Freddie" Gray, he becomes part of a secret elite unit made up of German-speaking Jews, the No. 3 troops. He undertakes several months of intensive special training. Then the unit is finally deployed near the front. As a British soldier, Manfred is involved in the landing in Normandy and the liberation of the Netherlands. At the end of March 1945, he crosses the Rhine with the Allied troops. Shortly afterwards, he arrives in his former hometown Borken for the first time in 7 years. He finds a city in ruins, but the house of the family, it still stands.
Passing through Borken, I go slow. The Allied military government is now in our former home. They have dressed the building up terrifically. It looks very impressive. I am glad. That'll teach the Jerrys. With their belief in mystic, they will not fail to notice the lesson.
Today, a lawyer has his office in the former house of the Ganz family. He welcomes the family on the journey into their history.
That's it, I recognize it.
As I've grown up, I've become more aware of who my grandfather was and what we've come from, and even being on this trip and being in Germany has been really special to me, to see what we came from and see that beautiful house that, my family had to leave, and I can't imagine what that's like. It's really awesome to be able to put everything in perspective and see, kind of paint a picture for the stories and paint a picture of the house that my grandfather grew up in and the journeys and the different towns he was in, although they probably look a lot different now. But it's been really exciting to feel closer to where he was and to where he grew up and where he was when he was my age and the things he was going through and the places he was seeing.
It's a big group, different range of ages. It is very different to see, how like Danny is taking everything, how Aviva is looking at everything, how my mother is feeling. Giora was telling us many things that I didn't know.
In the evening, the mayoress and a delegation from the city welcome the family to a shared Sabbath celebration. For the younger generation too, the family's warm encounter with their grandfather's hometown is an emotional moment.
Well, I was really, really surprised that this whole Shabbat dinner in Borken was much more than I expected. I was in Borken before, I saw the house from the outside before, but I was never, I've never met the people. So this was kind of interesting and actually very emotional that they care.
Although a thrilling moment, Borken remains only a stopover on the way east, both now and as it was back then.
My maps are very small scale. They only show the towns. Still, I know the country around here. The roads are appallingly bad. Total destruction. I think of the lovely days I spent here before 1938.
It continues across Germany. Intact roads, lush fields and forests, tranquil places. When Manfred followed the same route 70 years earlier, he faced a completely different picture.
Towards Paderborn. We find more and more people on the road. Pushing handcarts, perambulators, carrying rucksacks, cycling, everybody trying to get home. Poles, Russians, Dutchmen, Belgians, French, Yugoslavs, and German evacuees. But the great side of the Autobahn is Europe going home. It's like an exodus. There are just millions on the road following this easy route.
The Ganz family stop at a house in Oberlongwitz at the foot of the Erzgebirge. Manfred had stayed in the same house before embarking on the final stage to Theresienstadt. The Americans had set up their headquarters here. They're the most eastern units of the Western Allies. Manfred is housed in a large modern villa. Before the war, it was inhabited by the manufacturer Götze.
Tomorrow 3,000 Jerry prisoners will have to be fed. Herr Götze is being rung up. He complains he is in bed. The colonel asks him whether he wants to be fetched out with a riding whip. Then we go down. It's a huge factory. I interpret. Herr Götze is dressed in a very well-cut suit. We start discussing things. Subject switches to politics. Now he shouts at the top of his voice and gesticulates. I tell you, Stalin has won the war, he cries. We go from one extreme into the other. Our people have lost everything. They'll become communists. Götze cries. How can Europe be healthy? 2 wars in every generation. I remind him that it usually was Germany who started them.
The former factories are now empty and abandoned, but the villa is still in good condition. The family meets a local historian and contemporary witnesses of that time. They show them Manfred Ganz's travel report, and together they puzzle what was going on at that time.
We are very moved that you find it worthwhile to spend your time on our family history, which is history for us all, and important history. We are Germans, Dutch heritage. I don't think there was a time in my life that I didn't know that I was from German heritage and Dutch heritage. Certainly my family was proud of it.
I grew up in a German village. Like everyone in my village came from Germany. So it always felt close in a way. Always felt part of what I am. And I feel like the rest of the family does it as well. Like even the ones in the States were always German Americans. You know, so I think we're all on the same page.
The village we live in is of German Jews and Czech, people from Czechoslovakia. So there was a lot of German. Most of my age in the village, we all understand German. Lots of us speak German, not me, but lots of us speak German. So German was always around. I don't know if you saw today how many of us understood what was going on, yeah, because we all heard German all the time. My daughter, she asked me, what does Achtung mean? I know I saw it at home. Why at home? Because all the signs in the village were in German. And she recognized the name, the word, she never knew what it is.
The next morning, the most delicate part approaches. While the Ganz family now crosses the former zone borders without any problems, in 1945 the insecurity for Manfred increases with every kilometer to the east. Parts of the Erzgebirge are still controlled by German troops. Without suspecting it, Manfred drives through the middle of still unoccupied areas.
We follow them to Aue. The town is still German. German police on the street. Thousands of German soldiers. I stand up in the jeep. They crowd around us. It is impossible to get through. Are you coming, or are the Russians? Can you take us prisoner? After a while, we manage to get moving again. The town is undamaged. It is unlooted. This is the last glimpse of Germany as it was. Push on. I feel scared. But amongst all this, I am overawed by the beauty of the countryside around us. Steep mountains, covered with tall and slim fir trees. The road winds itself through them.
I think a lot of us were in Theresienstadt before. But the trip itself, and to see the route that he did, and to visit the places, I think that's part of it. To understand what was really, how big a project it was for him. And it was a very, very special thing to do. 2 days after the war ended, to take a jeep and to cross half of Europe on your own. But my Uncle Manfred, he had the guts and he had the courage and he had the, in Hebrew we say chutzpah. Chutzpah is a word in Hebrew and Yiddish that says that you are a bit arrogant, but you have a lot of self-confidence, and in good English, you don't give a damn about nobody. And he had that, and that's why he succeeded.
On the 14th of May 1945, after 3 days on the road, Manfred Ganz arrives at the concentration camp Theresienstadt. Today the former camp is a memorial and at the same time a sparsely populated, unreal Czech small town.
At last, Theresienstadt. Civilians show the way through the ghetto. I always thought I'd die with excitement at this moment, but I'm pretty cool now. Only the queer feeling in the pit of my stomach when I jump parachute. They are all ages, but every eye reflects senility and tiredness. What a grim sight. I cannot even force myself to smile at them. Everybody crowds around. Drive on carefully. Some are too weak to get out of the way quickly. This is the way we drove into liberated towns of France, Belgium, and Holland. The crowds were the same, but what a different atmosphere.
My parents were warned by a young lady whom I sent into the house to warn them that I was outside, so that they wouldn't be too shocked just seeing me there. They probably wouldn't have recognized me there. And then I waited for about maybe a minute or two. I was terribly excited. There were crowds and crowds around us. You just couldn't imagine the overcrowding in a concentration camp of this nature. But they were in a house, and I was, I think, one flight up, waiting until she had explained this to my parents. And suddenly they came out, and I was totally excited, but I don't think I showed it. I didn't want to show it. And my parents, of course, were practically devastated. So all their feelings, joy, but maybe desperation.
On that evening, Moritz Ganz writes only a few words in his diary.
Half past 6 in the evening on the terrace. Manfred. 3 o'clock in my bed. All the sufferings of the last years are forgotten. The boys are alive, and I see from Manfred's mouth and their letters they have remained the same. I'll be up till 6. I still can't believe we're united with everyone. The good Manfred brought us and the bad things we experienced. Everything seems to me to be a dream.
Yeah, this is it. I look at Father, and in spite of having prepared myself for a lot, I have to bite my teeth together not to show my shock. He is hardly recognizable, completely starved and wrecked. My first regular thoughts after a few minutes are, what a grim show. The next, our old commando watchword, don't panic. I led them to the balcony and forced them to sit down. They still can't utter a word for crying. Some of their friends, fine people, come to calm them down. Now at last I manage a smile. People rapidly collect in the yard beneath the balcony. They shout congratulations. Father is completely calmed down now. One look into his eyes convinces me that his spirit is completely unbroken. And he is still the old, realistic idealist he always has been. And that was my father. Certainly, he was his father's son. He was a realistic, idealistic. And he saw the world as it was, but he never lost the hope.
Shortly after returning to his unit in the Netherlands, Manfred Gens makes sure that his parents and other Dutch prisoners are brought home from Theresienstadt. Manfred, his brothers and parents survived the Holocaust. The parents follow their 2 sons, Karl and Theo, to Israel in the early 1950s. Manfred marries his childhood friend Anita. They're going to the US. The 3 brothers Gens build a successful life. The family from Borken now lives all over the globe, but continues to be closely connected.
I think as young people, after the war, all they wanted to do was get on with their life and, push the past away. The war was over. Let's have a life and move forward.
Reconstruction begins in Borken. But for the Gens family, the former home is now far away and almost forgotten.
Ich hatte eigentlich aus der Schule dieses Thema als für mich zu überwältigend, vielleicht auch zu emotional gefunden. Ich fand diese Zahl von 6 Millionen Toten unglaublich, konnte ich mir überhaupt nichts darunter vorstellen. Und ich habe mich dann so rangetastet und habe meine Diplomarbeit gemacht über Borken und die katholische Kirche zur Zeit des Nationalsozialismus. Und dann habe ich im November 1987 angefangen, den Herbert Jonas anzuschreiben.
In the 1980s, Mechthild Önning studies Jewish life in Borken as part of a student research project. She finds the addresses of former Jewish inhabitants of Borken who survived the Holocaust. She begins to write letters to them. A new relationship begins between Borkeners and the former Jewish inhabitants of the city.
Der erste Brief, den ich bekommen habe, war von Herbert Jonas und er datiert vom 24. Dezember 1987 und er hat so ein herrlich altmodisches Deutsch gehabt. Der Brief beginnt mit Wertes Fräulein Önning, mit meinem Mädchennamen Wertes Fräulein Önning. Endlich kümmert sich jemand mal um die jüdische Geschichte in Borken, in meiner Heimatstadt. Und ich möchte doch so gerne, dass das auch erforscht wird. Und alles, was ich tun kann, um Ihnen zu helfen, werde ich tun. Schreiben Sie bitte auch an meinen Cousin Hans-Fried Ganz in Amsterdam, der auf jeden Fall Ihnen auch gerne hilft. Hans-Fried schrieb, schreib bitte auch an meinen Bruder Karl-Heinz und an meinen Cousin Manfred Ganz, und Manfred hat dann den Brief, oder ich weiß nicht, oder Herbert Jonas hat den Brief dann an Theo weitergeleitet, sodass in so einem Schneeballsystem ich dann nachher um die 20 Namen hatte von jüdischen Überlebenden, die dann mit mir in Briefkontakt getreten sind.
1988 is the 50th anniversary of the Reichspogromnacht. Mechthild Oenning has made numerous contacts in the meantime. And since she's also a member of the town council, the town of Borken is organizing a reunion. The mayor at that time, Joseph Ehling, pays a lot of attention to the history of the Jewish citizens of Borken. The former Borken Jews who survived the Holocaust are invited, and more than 40 are coming, among them the three brothers Gershon, Manfred and Theo Ganz.
And I think going back to Borken was, for them, for my father and his brothers, was a very important step in starting to want to tell the story. Certainly Borken's position of inviting them back and wanting that to happen, I think helped open the door.
Ich habe in diesen Nächten, wo die zu Besuch waren, auch vor lauter Aufregung, ich glaube 2-3 Stunden nachts geschlafen. Aber das war so ein Adrenalinstoß, man merkte auch den Schlafmangel überhaupt nicht. Die Leute, die man dann über die Briefe kannte, kennenzulernen, war irre. Ich habe Manfred und seine Frau Anita vom Flughafen abgeholt. Da war also sofort eine ganz super Atmosphäre da. Ich habe sie dann ja auch 89 in Amerika besucht und da wurde das nochmal weiter fortgesetzt. Ich habe mich wie ein Familienmitglied gefühlt, aber nicht wie jemand Außenstehendes, der eigentlich ja Repräsentant der Gemeinde ist, in denen ihrer Familie so viel Leid auch zugefügt wurde. Das stand überhaupt nicht zwischen uns.
From now on, Manfred and his brothers, like many other former Jewish inhabitants of Borken, come almost every year to tell in schools about their story, the Holocaust and Judaism. Former teacher Heidrun Lügger remembers the visits.
Die Besuche der Familien Ganz, Kada und Jonas waren so besonders beeindruckend, weil das nun wirklich im Rahmen der Klasse in einem Aufeinanderzugehen der Menschen stattgefunden hat. Und die Schüler konnten ihnen direkt Fragen stellen und die Schüler waren von all diesen Begegnungen immer sehr beeindruckt.
Die Familie Ganz, wenn die in der Schule aufgetreten ist und was erzählt hat, dann war das Gefühl entstand dabei, das ist zeitlich gar nicht weit weg. Ne, weil die haben ja auch irgendwie diese Zeit so überbrückt und haben wieder da angeschlossen, wo sie mal weggegangen waren zum Teil. Und das war in unserem kollektiven Bewusstsein, wo ich ein Teil von war, irgendwie erstmal was mühsam wieder ausgegraben werden musste. Ne? Und das haben natürlich die Schüler auch gespürt. Das war ganz interessant und sehr beeindruckend und überraschend auch. Ne?
The Ganz brothers meet not only young students, but also their old classmates.
We went to visit in Borken, and it was my parents and Joey and I. I don't remember if Andy was there. And there was a Mr. Finke, who was a very good friend of my grandfather's. And we went to visit him because my father knew him. And then they talked, and Mr. Finker asked him, "Do you have any relationships with anybody of your class?" Then my father said he doesn't know who lives here anymore. And he said that he's through all sorts of names. And then he goes, "Oh, this guy, yeah, he was the only one to come to my bar mitzvah." Yeah. So Mr. Finker phones him and says, "Theo Ganz is here. Would you like to see him?" And we went to his house, from one minute to the next. We went to his house, And my father goes in, and he is so excited. And so my father comes in, and he shakes his hand, and he introduces my mother, introduces me, and then Joey comes in. Joey was 8, and Mr. Finke starts crying, and all over Joey, because he looked just like he remembered my father. And for him, it was terrible. And Joey was 8 years old, and this big guy crying all over his head. He didn't know what to do with it. And my father, he stood there like a piece of ice. I've never seen him like that. I don't know, since then, I've never seen him like that.
Das war für die Ganzens, glaube ich, auch nochmal auch ein ganz wichtiger Abschnitt, dass sie dann doch auch nochmal zurückgekommen sind und ja, tatsächlich ja auch gesehen haben, dass es nicht nur Monster waren und dass eben jetzt auf diese Art auch eine Wiedergutmachung, eine sehr gelungene Wiedergutmachung in Gang gesetzt wurde. Und an der sie ja mitgearbeitet haben. Ne? Das finde ich ja bei dieser Familie auch so beeindruckend, dass sie eben, sie haben ja die Hand gereicht.
Those who come regularly now also impress the people of Borken with their lifestyle.
Dieses sportliche, weitgereiste, weltmännische, die brachten eine ganze Menge frische Luft von außen nach Borken. Das transportierten sowohl Manfred als auch Gershon als auch Theo. Dieses Hoppla, jetzt bin ich hier und ich komme aus Borken. Und sowas kann man auch aus Borken machen, wenn man aus Borken kommt. Nicht nur dieses brav geföhnte, gescheitelte, sondern auch so ein bisschen etwas aus sich zu machen, auch aus verhältnismäßigen Widersprüchen, Fallstricken, sich noch seinen Weg zu bahnen. Dafür standen schon die Ganzbrüder.
Similarly, after his trip to Theresienstadt, Manfred Ganz also writes down his impressions in 1988, immediately after his return from Borken.
15th November 1988. We are home in the US again, and we are emotionally drained. This was the second most emotionally draining experience of my life, the first being me liberating my own parents from concentration camp. But this week we were transposed in time. We abruptly went back to the life which we had left 50 years ago, a life of which we had not too many fond memories and to which we had no desire to ever return. But here we were. A gathering of almost all the surviving Jewish contemporaries of 50 years ago, now living in Israel, the US, or in Holland. Lavishly and considerately invited by the descendants are the successors of those whose hostility had driven us out. Welcomed by many of our former neighbors and playmates, and sought out by a small group of activists who, for the sake of honesty and the sake of their children, feel compelled to face up to the uglier side of the history of their town and nation.
Manfred Ganz dies in the USA in 2010. Students from Borken plant a tree to commemorate the Ganz brothers, many other former Jewish inhabitants, and their message. The history of the Ganz family is now once again part of the town of Borken. And Borken is part of the family history.
I don't know, I guess the way he tells it in a very forgiving way, and I think it's really special. I would not expect to, from a person who went through that much to actually have this kind of view on things. And because he does, then I feel like I have to,